Our rights need to be protected. Women's lives are just as important, and that's what we've put on the line.
Women's lives are extremely important, but you don't get to make the decision to kill somebody else because it's in your body.
We handled that.
Fiery debate, the passionate responses over abortion after Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump face off on stage. Different visions. We take a close look at the candidates' plans for the nation's economy. Early voting fight. Some Tarrant County College students demand they be able to cast their ballots on campus. Why this all came to a head. Good morning, I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts now. Hello and welcome to Eye on Politics. Hope you're having a great Sunday. And we begin with Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump and the very different visions they have for the future.
Make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success.
Frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
When it comes to their economic plans, Vice President Harris wants to increase deductions for business startup costs from $5,000 to $50,000, a tax credit of $6,000 for parents of newborns, and down payment assistance for first-time homebuyers. She would also raise taxes on those making more than $400,000 a year and on corporations. Harris also agreed with former President Donald Trump to end taxes on tips. Now the former president also just added that he wants to end the tax on overtime pay as well. Trump would also extend all personal and business tax cuts that he signed into law in 2017. He also wants to end taxes on Social Security, lift restrictions on energy production, and reduce government regulations. The responses to last week's debate have proven to be just as passionate as the candidates were last Tuesday. I spoke with Democrat Kim Olson, a retired United States Air Force colonel and 25-year combat veteran who ran for Congress and Texas Agriculture Commissioner, and Republican Michael Williams, a former Texas Railroad Commissioner and former Texas Education Agency Commissioner. I want to play a clip, and it was the very first question right out of the gate. The question was to Vice President Harris about, are people better off now than they were 4 years ago? She did not answer that question directly. Instead, she talked about her economic plan. Former President Trump then focused on inflation and the high prices. Let's take a look.
We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time.
I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
All right, so what did you make of that exchange?
The American people are concerned that they cannot pay for eggs and they cannot pay for bacon, and gasoline is too high, and she did not address that question. So she did not tell the American people what is she going to do about a problem that they are experiencing, and that is something that they want to hear. So even though she was prepared last night and had a good performance, they didn't get answers from her about what she would do as president.
Kim.
Well, this is, again, what I like about America. We can sit at a table and disagree, and I disagree with you on your assessment of that, Michael, because, again, when someone says, look, I have a concept of a plan, can you imagine the concept of a plan a military member would say to her boss about, I got a concept of a plan on how to execute a war? You'd be fired in a minute. And if you want to see a plan, look at your 2025. We're talking about the economy, and she has a plan. She articulated it later on in her debate. Everybody suffered inflation under COVID, and we're back to pre-COVID. Yesterday's numbers showed that, pre-COVID numbers.
Let's go to the second clip that I want to talk about. This is on border security and illegal immigration, obviously still one of the top issues here in the state of Texas. And last night, the vice president was asked a very direct question about why it took until 6 months before the election for the administration to do an executive order to change the asylum laws. She did not answer that question directly, but she did attack former President Trump and his criticism and him calling up Republicans in Congress to kill the bipartisan bill. And then he focused on the record numbers of illegal immigration. So let's take a look.
She's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C., and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills.
That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
All right, Kim, what'd you think?
Well, I thought she handled that question beautifully. And again, if we had gotten that bill signed, yes, you can do an executive order, but we all know that once administrations change, executive orders can disappear in a heartbeat. So let's do what this democracy was built to do, which was have debates, run it through the House, run it through the Senate, back to the House, had that bipartisan bill signed by could have been signed by the president, but instead Trump called in because it was more politically advantageous to him. And again, instead of addressing the question of illegal immigrants, he pivots to Ohio, where you're making up stories about immigrants eating dogs. Seriously, this is who we want as our presidential leader, that this is the person who's going to solve our border issue, which we do have here in Texas.
Kim, let's go back to the question. The question that was posed to us, why it took you so long. She did not answer that question. And the reason she didn't answer that question, because they did not want to solve the problem at all. When you look at the executive order, of course a new administration could change the executive order, but this one wouldn't. A Trump administration wouldn't do that. The Trump administration wants to close off that border, wants to secure that border.
All right, let's go to the next clip. And this really was some of the most passionate debate, I thought, and that was about the issue of abortion. And she really criticized the former president for putting in 3 Supreme Court justices who helped overturn Roe v. Wade 2 years ago. She went after the former president for that. He took credit for bringing the issue back to the states. Let's watch.
This is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened.
You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot? She didn't want that?
I think he was right, and it's a good thing that he appointed 3 Supreme Court justices that voted to overturn Roe in the Dobbs case. It's a good thing that it's returned to the states.
Kim, what did you think? Strong moment for the vice president?
Absolutely a strong moment, and a strong moment for women around America. My rights and my daughter's rights and all daughters of America's rights should be protected no matter what state they live on. We should not have fugitive women living in the state of Texas that have to cross the border in order to get to a state where she can get reproductive health care. That is crazy in the year of 2024. And you want to talk about protecting women's lives. We have women who have to go into septic before they are able to receive abortions, which they need in order to save their lives or to save their uterus so they can have children later on in life. This is insane that it's a good thing that some state, depending on their gerrymandered, legislatures, get to decide what happens to my daughter's body or all of Texas women's daughters' bodies. It is wrong. Our rights need to be protected, and if, in case you haven't noticed, I feel very passionate about this, and I think Harris is spot on to push back hard, because all American women deserve the right to decide what happens to their own bodies. Full stop, Jack. Full stop.
Question is...
Jack, no, I must.
Go ahead.
We've had this discussion before.
You never have to make this decision, Michael. That is why I'm sitting between two men who never have to make this decision for their body, and it is
Kim,
painful.
I don't have to make the decision for my own body. You're right about that. But as a member of society, I get to make a decision about how my society exists and how it lives and what decisions that it makes about its future. And we have to protect innocent human life. And
women's lives are just as important, and that's what we've put on the line.
women's lives are extremely important. We're doing almost what they did last night. Women's lives are extremely important. But you don't get to make the decision to kill somebody else because it's in your body. That's not your decision. But that's a debate, as I said before, that's a debate in America that we ought to have. And I welcome that debate.
And this election will show that most American people, the majority of American people, believe that women have a right to choose what happens to their body.
And Kim, I welcome that debate.
CBS News has invited the vice president and former president to take part in a second debate, but Trump said Thursday he won't take part in another one. Now, our weekly look as we track the 7 all-important battleground states where the election will be won. And as you might expect, they really remain very close. And we start in the Southwest, as we always do, with Arizona, where Trump has increased his lead over Harris from last week to 1.6 percentage points. In Nevada, Harris keeps her margin over Trump at 0.6 percentage points. Over to Georgia, where Trump regained the lead from last week, where he's just 0.3 percentage points ahead. In Wisconsin, Harris has increased her margin over Trump to 1.8 percentage points, and this is still the largest margin among these states. In Michigan, Harris's lead shrunk a little bit from last week to just below 1 percentage point. Pennsylvania remains tied for the second week. And in North Carolina, Trump's lead dropped, and it's nearly a tie. He's ahead by just 0.1 percentage point. We will see how the polls change in the next week after the debate. Coming up next, North Texas college students fight to keep their early voting polling location when Eye on Politics returns. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Some Tarrant County college students are declaring victory after a majority of county leaders sided with them and voted against a proposal by the county judge to move early voting locations off their campuses. Amelia Mogavero has the story.
The motion passes by a vote of 4-1. So, thank you. That issue is now over.
After more than 5 hours, commissioners voted 4-1 in a special meeting to keep early voting on a number of higher education campuses in Tarrant County.
I would have done it 3,000 times over.
Definitely. I would have skipped all my classes for this.
The vote ultimately approved 51 sites across the county, dozens of college students speaking today to keep polling locations on their campuses.
Yeah, we defeated Tim O'Hare's voter suppression attempt, and we know he'll bring more in the future, and we're going to defeat him again.
Commissioner Manny Ramirez says polling places is a nonpartisan issue.
This process did expose some flaws. It exposed that not every single commissioner's precinct is equally balanced when it comes. But today, I think that approving the elections administrator's recommendations, it was a common sense measure for me.
The lone no vote came from County Judge Tim O'Hare, who pushed to take the voting site locations off campuses, including UT Arlington. O'Hare arguing the college sites have a lower turnout and are too close to other sites.
16% of the early voting locations are on college campuses. So if you want to talk about suppressing voters, this suppresses senior citizens.
Students calling this day a win.
Today's just another win for democracy, and we'll keep fighting for it.
Even while the 2 Democratic commissioners were out of the state. However, we're told that those travel requests were approved weeks beforehand, and those 2 commissioners were able to attend today's meeting and vote virtually. In Fort Worth, Amelia Mogavero, CBS News, Texas.
All right, thank you, Amelia. And Dallas County's elections administrator is responding to what he calls misinformation on social media about whether the homeless can register to vote. Sarah Jenkins has this week's brief.
Those claims made on social media come from a widely shared video. It claims to show election workers being told to, quote, illegally lie on registration and use a church address to register homeless people to vote. Hyder Garcia is the Dallas County election administrator. He says Texas state law is very clear and having a home is not a requirement to be eligible to vote. Garcia said voters can use an address other than their residential address, like a church, as a mailing address. He went on to say, quote, our unhoused population in Dallas County, many of whom are veterans, deserve to be treated like every other voter who is allowed to use an alternate mailing address. Dallas County Elections said that U.S. citizens eligible to vote under federal and state law will be allowed to register to vote whether they are unhoused or not.
And a friendly reminder, you must be registered to vote by October 7th. Coming up, county election administrators recently got a lesson in stress management. I know it may sound a little strange. We'll explain what's behind that when Eye on Politics returns. Now to a CBS News investigation on managing the vote. CBS News has found in Texas more than 1/3 of the people who run all the county's elections are new from the last presidential election in 2020. We look at why this is happening and what it means to you, the voter.
I think it's going to be an intense season coming after the 2020 election.
Harris's liberal ideas get people killed.
There are some people who think we should be a country of chaos, of fear, of hate.
Count every vote! There's been a lot of pressure, and the tone in social media can be very difficult, right? For lack of a better word, nastiness.
For Dallas County Election Administrator Jairo Garcia and others who run elections in counties across Texas, political pressure has been a challenge. Garcia says while it hasn't been a big problem for him in Dallas County, it certainly was when he oversaw elections in Tarrant County. He remembers being harassed.
I've been threatened. If you go back to 2020, post-election, it was very, very difficult for me and my family. And how many people have said things about me that I've been accused in countries abroad or that I have criminal charges. And it's just this intent to I think, break your spine.
Because they want you to leave the job?
Because there's this whole current of people who have been so invested in saying there has to be something wrong with elections that I think at this point they're just wanting to create the illusion because they don't want to back down, right? For some people, it's just hard to say, hey, look, it's been 4 years and we found nothing.
Garcia says that pressure on other election administrators has led them to quit. 2 years ago in Gillespie County, home to Fredericksburg, Texas, the election administrator and her small staff all quit, citing stalking and death threats that began after people made false claims about the 2020 election. A report by the Bipartisan Policy Center released in April found, quote, increased hostility could be contributing to recent increases in turnover, with election officials and administration facing heightened scrutiny, threats, and harassment. The center found Texas's turnover rate of county elections officials as of January this year was 41%, meaning more than 1/3 are now compared to those who had the job in 2020. A CBS News analysis of research from the OSET Institute found that since 2020, 77 of the state's 254 counties lost at least one election administrator or county clerk who ran elections. At least 13 Texas counties lost more than one election administrator or county clerk. They include Hamilton County in north central Texas, which is on its 4th county clerk in 4 years, and Dallas County, where Garcia is the 3rd person to hold the job since 2020. There's no indication that past election administrators in Dallas County were harassed. But Edward Perez, a board member for the nonprofit institute, says the recent trend across Texas is troubling.
By any number, it is an unprecedented number of election officials that are leaving the profession. It is something that is new and has been greatly accelerated just in the past few years.
At a recent conference, the Secretary of State met directly with elections officials from across Texas, and she offered them emotional support.
Hi. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
You really tried to give them a pep talk. Why do you feel that's necessary?
Yes. I wanted to tell them face to face how very, very grateful I am for the work they do. Our elections are in good hands.
Aside from updating election officials on new legislation and rules this year, the Secretary of State's office, for the first time, is also providing a lesson on stress management.
There are going to be people that get up in your face and are angry and they didn't like something that happened. Just take it in and let it go. And I think perhaps the reason that we lost some is that they weren't able to handle that. We're going to make sure they can.
CBS News found with all the election administrators and county clerks who've left since 2020, the state has lost 416 years of experience, which could impact 60% of registered voters in Texas. Now more than 18 million people. How big of a deal is that?
It is. Experience lets you not slip over things that have happened in the past. And it comes into play a lot when you run into unforeseen scenarios or specific circumstances, right? You know how to react better. You've been through these plans. You don't overlook things in stress. It does make a difference.
Garcia says he's grateful for the Secretary of State's show of support to election administrators and county clerks. After the 2020 election, audits conducted in Dallas, Tarrant, Collin, and Harris counties by the Secretary of State's office found while there were a few irregularities, the election itself was secure and that there was no widespread fraud. Garcia suggests residents sign up to be a poll watcher or on the ballot board so they can learn more about elections. And remember, you can watch all our in-depth interviews on our website, cbsnewstexas.com. Scroll down to the Eye on Politics icon. And that's all for Eye on Politics today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening at CBS News Texas. I hope to see you again next week.